Hello, welcome to Fill the House. I'm Peter, and we're doing a major spoilers and a modern Marvel at the same time. For those of you who don't know the format, who maybe watch the modern Marvel but not my major spoiler reviews, basically, I'm going to take, in my major spoilers, I take a medium, book, television show, whatever, and I address it on a little bit of a deeper level. I don't just give a quick overview that's attempted to be spoiler free, like I do with quick reviews or with a lot of my modern Marvel stuff. This one, because I want to be able to talk more specifically about some issue within the medium that I think merits a deeper discussion. So, obviously, what we're going to be talking about today, if you followed my feed at all, was Deadpool. So I busted out my Katana. And before any of you who haven't seen it yet and are like, oh, major spoiler, I don't want any spoilers for Deadpool. Before any of you click off, let me just give you one thing real fast. You should either, if you want to be able to converse with people about comic books and comic book movies and, just that, but really probably even action blockbuster films, you should either watch Deadpool or watch a spoiler heavy review of Deadpool. Because, jump to my conclusion and put it in the front for you, this movie will change how, already has changed how comic book movies in particular, but I think blockbusters in general, will be made. How they'll be viewed, how they'll be marketed, and what's expected from them. It's all going to change. It all hinges on this movie. I would go so far as to say, and I've said to friends before when I was working out my outline for this, comic book movies will start to be divided, I think, into two categories. Pre-post Iron Man, i.e. when the Marvel Cinematic Universe started, and pre-post Deadpool, which will be the other linchpin. That's not to say that there weren't good comic book movies before Iron Man, and that there won't be good ones after Deadpool, or that they'll get better after Deadpool across the board. No, I'm just saying though, those are going to be two notable linchpin moments where things change for comic book movies. And I would dare say, as I mentioned before, Deadpool, it will probably be for the entire summer blockbuster action genre. It will change. So let's jump in right now and say, why do I say that? Well, I guess the first thing to do is to talk about some of the stuff surrounding the movie and give you examples of why I think I can make this claim. For starters, Wolverine, the next Wolverine movie, is already been said it's going to be rated R. It's been slated for that, which of course Deadpool was rated R, and as of this week was the highest grossing rated R film of all time. And it was done on a ridiculously small budget, so somebody's making a ton of money. But now, it was said by the studio that the Wolverine movie was going to be rated R regardless, like it was originally intended to be rated R. And on one level, I'm willing to accept that. But I also think, and I think everybody would have to admit, if Deadpool had just bombed or been rejected basically due to its content, there's no way that the Wolverine movie wouldn't have been trimmed down to a PG-13, probably been a lesser movie, but trimmed down to a PG-13, and maybe had a director's cut or a rated R version that was released after the theatrical version, as is common. I just don't see that happening if Deadpool had bombed. Deadpool, of course, didn't bomb, so they're keeping to go with it. Now, to throw on top of that, we have Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, which we're being told, oh, there's a rated R version. There's definitely a rated R. When we're gonna release. Okay, that opens the whole thing. My point is that you can see where that they think that's gonna make it popular now, and it's of course getting killed in reviews right now. I don't see how adding content to a movie that is already as long as it is possibly going to make it better. Stuff gets cut for a reason most of the time. Suicide Squad. I read an article just earlier in the week, a couple days ago, that said they are spending millions of dollars at this point to reshoot it, portions of it, to make the movie funnier than it was. Which is disturbing on one level because I don't see why Suicide Squad ever wouldn't have been funny. I mean, it's supposed to be pretty, um, basically Deadpoolish dark humor, but apparently they didn't originally plan on doing it that way, and they have to refilm, massive expenditure to refilm part of it because they see how popular Deadpool is. Incidentally, feel sorry for DC. I mean, they just can't not catch a break at all. The Suicide Squad, regardless of whether or not it's going to be a good movie, is going to be constantly compared as a reaction and ripoff to Deadpool. Whether or not it even is in reality, it won't matter. That's going to be the perception. And I don't think it's going to be able to compete, particularly if they're going back to make it be funny. It's probably going to be a mess. But we'll set that aside. We'll move on. uh, so you can clearly see, I think, that this has changed what's expected of comic book movies, both for good and for ill, in my mind. So, for starters, I think it's good that Deadpool has shown to the studio that they can artistically pull the cap off of something and it will still be appreciated for what it is. I particularly mean this in the case of, like, for example, the Wolverine movie that's going to be coming out. Wolverine is an inherently violent and bloody character in the comics. His comic lines are dark, and he's always felt a tad restricted in that rated R, or in the rated PG-13 movies. Like, for instance, the movie The Wolverine, which came out not terribly long ago, and I know I probably liked that more than some people did because I'm a fan. But regardless, you could tell it was definitely constrained at times by what it was a hard PG-13. I'm sure they made a rated R version that comes across as a movie that was made as a rated R and cut down to a PG-13. And it would be nice to see one of those that doesn't have those restrictions. And that's where it could be positive. When a studio isn't necessarily shooting for the rated R rating, but it just doesn't feel constrained to be within the PG-13. And frankly, Disney's not going to bring out a rated R movie. You're never going to see a Marvel Cinematic Universe movie that's rated R. Maybe eventually. I don't even think eventually. I would stand here and say that's never going to happen. So if you want that content, you can still get it. And here's the other thing that I think is interesting and positive. I think it's reminded people that, look, just because it's a comic book movie doesn't mean kids should necessarily see it, which is something that needed to be reminded. I mean, I'm pretty... I don't want to tell people how to raise their kids. You can do whatever you want. But it does always kind of bother me when I go to an Avengers movie or the X-Men movies, something, and it's PG-13, and there's a parent sitting next to me with their 3-year-old kid. And I'm like, it's rated for a reason, man. I mean, I realize it's bright and colorful as a superhero, but it's going to be scary. It's going to be violent. It's going to be, there's stuff in there that's not for a kid. That's why it's not rated G or PG, And I think this movie, of course, we all saw probably tweets and stories about parents being like, oh, such a disappointment. I had to walk out of the theater in Deadpool with my kid. And it's like, well, yeah, it was a rated R movie, was what everybody always jumped on these things. Like, what were you thinking? Duh. I remember one specifically stating that, why isn't there some kind of warning? And somebody replied, like, you mean like the rated R thing that popped up on the screen before the movie started? That wasn't your warning? So I think that can be a positive thing. It might create a more parental aware, a reminder to parents that they need to be aware, not just that there's a superhero in it, but what content is actually in it. And do you really want your kids exposed to that? And two, it can allow for a little more flexing of some artistic muscles to get certain characters where they need to be. And like I said, you're never going to lose your younger crowd superhero movies. They're always going to be there. If anything, what could happen here, and this could be a negative side effect, is if you see some movies getting darker progressively in an attempt to just get that rated R, and then a wedge driven between whatever movie comes out that's going to be PG, low PG, just to give the kids and try to have two separate. Like, I don't want to see that happen, but it theoretically could. DC will continue to screw stuff up the way they always do and make no sense whatsoever. Yeah, I went there and said that. Justin, you can argue with me later if you want. So, Setting that aside, let's talk about Deadpool itself. Because the whole crux of this is that Deadpool was successful. It had to be successful, and it had to work in order for it to change something on this level. And did it succeed in what it set out to do? Well, I'm going to say this like I said with Episode 7 of Star Wars. Even if Episode 7 of Star Wars did what it needed to do, it made me excited to see more Star Wars material, and it entertained me while I was watching it. That was all it had to do, and it did that. Even for most people, even if you didn't like that film, it left you wanting to see Episode 8 just to see what was going to happen in the aftermath of Episode 7. Deadpool succeeds on that level. As a dark comedy, I was laughing out loud several times in the theater, which I'm Reformed Baptist. We don't give expressions of emotion in public settings. It's not what we do. But I was there and I was laughing. It had some ridiculously funny moments. And I knew even just watching, even in just the trailer, you had a better representation of Colossus in the little 30 seconds he appeared in the trailer than you have in any of the X-Men movies, all the X-Men running time combined. So I was actually really excited to see him in the movie, and he knocked it out of the park. Of course, with a CGI character, and you could tell it, but it was still hilarious. It was very, very good. The credits for the movie, by the way, were a scream. And definitely, to throw this down there, move to my next point. More than just succeeding as a funny movie, Deadpool succeeded in being satire. And satirizing not just comic book movies, but really blockbusters in general, and action movies in general. And the thing about that I enjoy is I really do like satire. And if you ask me, I don't think Hollywood has really produced a good satire in a while. Now, we've gotten lots of spoofs, and we've gotten lots of very sarcastic movies, but you haven't really had satire, which is an art form unto itself. And that's not to knock spoofs, because I do like them as well, and it's not to knock, just sarcastic movies that are somewhat biting. I like those as well, but they didn't really hit that level of satire that this nailed. And satire is one of those things that's maybe on one level a little hard to define and to give examples of, but you know it when you're watching it, and Deadpool falls into that category perfectly. I would also say, on that note, just of the humor value, the movie that this was constantly coming to my mind when I was watching this was Boondock Saints. If you watched Deadpool and you haven't seen Boondock Saints, go back and watch Boondock Saints. This movie owes it a lot. And if you haven't watched Deadpool, but you've watched and enjoyed the Boondock Saints, you will enjoy Deadpool. And actually, they're very similar, not just in tone, but in content, I would say. Again, it was the movie that kept coming to my mind, because the thing is before I went to watch Deadpool, you're hearing, oh, it's hard rated R, it's a hard rated R, and it is. I'm not trying to minimize that. But again, even in content, it reminded me a lot of Boondock Saints, which is a hard R, but, it wasn't, my point is that there wasn't necessarily anything groundbreakingly shocking in this movie, particularly if you've seen something like Boondock Saints. It was very similar in my mind. There was a little more nudity in Deadpool than there was in Boondock Saints, though Boondock Saints had, for example, the strip club scene. But a lot of it was like that strip club scene in Boondock Saints, where there's nudity, but it's not really eroticized. It's not erotic. And that, I think, almost plays into the satire feel of Deadpool, where you have content which other movies obviously rub in your face in an attempt to be edgy or to be, like, oh, look. And Deadpool plays it for what it is. It's like, look, this is actually kind of stupid on one level. There is no point for it. And that's the thing about Deadpool, is half of it, and it doesn't have a point beyond. Its point is that look at how over the top this is. And if you pulled this up and put it in a different context, and people be like, oh, gritty, dark, serious, and Deadpool's like, no, it's stupid and not gritty or dark or serious. It's hilarious. when viewed just slightly differently, which is really, like I said, a part where it truly hits some good satire. So, all that to say, would I recommend the movie? I mean, no. Because of the content, I wouldn't recommend it, but I would say you should see it if you want to be able to talk about comic book movies and talk about just movies in general, blockbuster movies. It will be a linchpin movie. And of course, if you have seen something before like Boondock Saints and you're like, well, that wasn't anything that I wouldn't, mind, well, then you're probably going to be right at home. Negative things about the movie. I know there's people who will disagree with me. The ending was, I thought, kind of a sellout ending for what the movie was. As in, you're satirizing this comic book and blockbuster type movie, and you get to the end, and you essentially play it safe and go with that. I'm not saying I would know how to do it different. I don't claim to be a brilliant Hollywood writer, but I felt like the ending let the rest of the movie down slightly. Even within that, as I was watching a review who said, and it's true, this movie captured how the X-Men comics were fun. And that's something that you miss from a lot of the modern X-Men movies. And frankly, this is part of DC's problem when they're trying to make something dark. It's like, okay, Deadpool is dark. It's dark humor, dark humor, but it still was fun. You got to the end, you're like, this is a fun movie. You don't get that when you're watching Man of Steel. You don't get that when you're watching Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. And so, yeah, like I said, even when it was dropping the ball, it was actually still doing pretty well. And when it was firing on all cylinders, it was incredible. Colossus, like I said, was phenomenal. The portrayal of Deadpool actually encapsulated his character perfect. And I guess really this is the thing about it that made me enjoy it on one level, and that where I think why it was able to hit a certain note that something like Suicide Squad's gonna miss. This movie, Deadpool had to do this much. This was the bar it needed to hit. Funny-ish, a few fourth wall breaks, lots of cursing and lots of violence. And fans would have been, so that's all it needed, but it hit here. Like, you could tell there was so much passion and love that went into this project, and it really showed. And I think that was the strongest thing about it that came across to me, was just the effort that went into this was so much higher than it had to be. Everything from the story of how it began and, was funded and all that, all the way up to its actual release. So this is already going on way longer than I intended it to. My point was basically to talk about why I feel it's going to be that difference and how that difference is going to play out. Which was, of course, I think its success has opened the door to hopefully a little bit more roomier expression. And man, there just wasn't that much negative to talk about in this movie. Other than, like I said, the ending was a little bit trite. But anyway, I'll see you guys on my next video, which hopefully won't be as long until it comes out, and hopefully it won't be as long to watch it. And until then.